Hey guys, good morning. How is everybody?
Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
Hey Shiva, good morning. It's a sleepy crew. Good morning, everybody. Good to see Eric. Give it a few minutes here. I think we had check Shiva. I think we had over 100 accept. Let's see. 210. Shiva. See if we can set a record today. All right, folks, we'll give it to 3 past and we'll get going. Hey, Tim. Garrett, good to see you. Hey, Adam. Okay. All right, shall we ready to rock and roll here?
Yes, Andrew.
All right. All right, let's get going. Good morning, everybody. Andrew Morgan here on behalf of the Cyber CNS team for the partner call. Looks like most of you have joined us before. If you haven't, welcome for the first time. I'm going to hand the reins over to Shiva momentarily where he'll give us an update. I'll monitor Q&A and then we'll open up the floor for a no holds bar brawl. How does that sound, Shiva?
Absolutely fantastic.
All right, take it away, Shiva.
Let me just share my screen.
All right, we can see you, Shiva. We see WhatsApp images. Oh, there, that's much better.
Yeah. So, good morning, everyone. So, basically just walking through all the updates. I'm sorry, basically we couldn't make the call last week because Bangalore in India, we had basically heavy torrential rain and there was a lot of water logging. And we basically did not have people coming into the office itself last week and we lost a lot of network and power. So essentially we couldn't make the call last week, but the team has been working on the various items. And basically I'll just give you a very quick update. First is that this particular issue, which was basically running for, I think, almost like 3 months now. I'm hoping that none of you are seeing this issue any longer because it is very critical that we confirm this, that you're not seeing this issue of basically the packages reconfiguring themselves. So we've basically done our own dipstick checks in multiple machines and we've not seen this recur. So if this is okay, then basically we will kind of close this issue out, which was basically kind of long pending. Now I'll come to basically a feature which actually it started with Andrew and then others basically chimed in, including Tim and Andrew, Vatasco, and Justin as late as yesterday. So one of the key things that essentially we are doing is basically creating this concept of what we are calling as a template builder. So I actually presented this in the last call where basically I talked of it as a rule builder. And then basically we got a lot of feedback in terms of we may need the same engine. to
Hi.
basically,
Regarding a former employee, you wouldn't know that, so.
uh,
Okay.
we need the same engine to basically work
What's
across.
going on?
I got this stupid thing from unemployment on Nick.
Oh,
Remember Nick?
oh,
Jackie
yeah.
goes, who's Nick?
Mute that person.
I
Shiva.
don't know.
Um,
Thanks, whoever that was.
so the key thing is basically being able to kind of define for yourself what you want to basically send as part of a ticket, as part of an email, as part of a Slack message, or as part of Teams is basically kind of something that was very talked of as being very critical. And what we've been able to do is basically kind of cater to that. So what we have is essentially kind of this concept of a template builder. So you can essentially come in and basically create a template. Now, again, you don't really create one template per alert or alert type, because we know that each alert essentially has a data that's associated with it, and you basically have to send different kinds of data and different data. So what happens is that you can essentially kind of create one, you can use one instance of template builder and build out all the templates for all the alerts that you want to override. Now, the way that this works is if you have a template which is defined over here within the template builder, then the system will use this template and not use the default template that we provide with the system. If it does not see an associated template over here, it will basically use the default system template. So that's how essentially it has been built. And what we've done is basically categorized everything into like types and subtypes. So basically, you can choose what type a particular event is and what are the subtypes, and you can essentially kind of override all of those pieces. And this is something that we talked about last week. As soon as you basically kind of put the subtype in, the default template appears. Now we have two things, right? One is essentially you can define a template as a template which is a HTML template, which will be used while we're sending emails and we're sending Slack messages, etc. However, when we basically use the same thing within PSA, we'll actually strip out the HTML tags and basically push it without the HTML tags, because most of the PSAs do not basically support this, right? So essentially, you can you will see that automatically happen. So we strip the HTML and then we reformat it and basically send this out. And then you can define basically the title, and with the title also, you can essentially kind of define what should be the like what should be in, you can actually parameterize the title too. So you can essentially kind of, so if it's an email, this title is used in the subject. If it's a Slack message, it's used in the title of the message that goes out. If it is basically a PSA, then it is essentially the, I think the initial description or the initial, the title of the ticket. So essentially, this is how you can essentially kind of put parameters in. And on the right-hand side, you essentially look at, you can see all the statistics which are associated with the particular object that is under question and the related objects also. So essentially, it provides the ability for you to basically kind of jump between different types of objects. So you have an asset, you can basically get the count of vulnerabilities, which is a stats object that's associated with it. And we essentially have been able to kind of pull that together. So that way, what happens is that you get basically, if you have any related information, you can pull all that information into this template. So the whole idea is to basically keep this enriched. And the goal that at least we have in the future is, in the next step of doing this is basically kind of creating a place where people can create these kinds of templates and then basically make it available to others. Okay. And if you folks think that you want to charge others for these templates, we are happy to basically facilitate that too. But essentially, this is the thought process that we have in this entire scheme of things. And so the example is that like this, basically, when I've defined the entire piece, it will essentially come like this in an email. And the same, because it's a full HTML, so you have all the formatting. So you have all the formatting options. This is essentially like just a normal HTML editor, which has all the things. You can make it bold, you can make it this thing, all of those pieces. And then we also basically have the same thing, which appears as a ticket. And in this ticket, essentially, we've removed all the formatting and it appears as a description inside of the formatting. So this essentially is what we've been kind of working on. And this, again, with the template, you can define for each template, whether it is applicable to a particular integration or multiple integrations. You can also define to which company these templates apply to. So you can actually define a template for one set of companies and choose to define a set of templates for a different set of companies. And I know that this next question that will come up probably from somebody smart like Dennis is, can I do this based on tags? Then the answer is, right now, we've not finished the tag piece, but basically within a couple of weeks, we'll finish the ability for you to assign the templates to assets with specific tags. So that way you can essentially kind of create these templates and basically use these templates in any way possible. Now, the second part of the discussion is basically about external scans. And this was again basically a thread that we picked up where everybody said we like all of the other pieces, but external scans are not as comprehensive as we would like it to be. So if you remember, basically a month back, we released a beta version of the external scan where we basically added features for profiles where you can define how many ports you want to basically scan, and all of those pieces essentially were defined. I'm thankful to people like Simon Hopkin and others who actually given us examples of certain reports where they felt that basically their the data was basically more comprehensive, and B, the entire thing was much better put out. So essentially, this is kind of a version that we are essentially kind of putting out tomorrow, where we essentially have this view of all the results, where you can basically see an overall grading, number of ports, critical, high, others. And then we basically have this table which talks about what operating systems and what is the probability that this operating system that we've detected is correct. And then what are the open ports and what is the product which is running on that particular port. And again, with vulnerabilities, we've kind of given you a broad view of all the vulnerabilities, right? And then we give you a complete rundown of all the vulnerabilities that exist on that system and which port it exists. And basically all the details of the certificate, TLS versions that already existed to the existing piece. But when you click on a particular vulnerability, we kind of give you the complete details of the vulnerability in terms of what's the category, what is the CVSS, what is the remediation, what is the impact, right? And then what is the complete description of that particular piece. So we've kind of pulled all this information from various databases, pulled it together so that we can essentially give you this kind of a comprehensive report. Now, this report is going to be available in both places. One is it basically will be available on the UI, and also basically in the downloadable report. Both of these, basically there is two reports that have been created. One is essentially what is called an external scan summary report, which basically talks of the higher level summary, which is similar to what other tools do. And then there is a detailed report, which basically talks in detail of each of the vulnerabilities and basically gives all these fields, which basically says, how can you remediate, what is the impact, and what is the description. So this is basically getting released end of day tomorrow. So with that, essentially, we believe that the external scan, while it earlier identified a lot of things, it basically was falling short in a few areas. The key areas that we focused on, which we believe we were missing, especially around Exchange server detection, then OWA detection. Third is basically Office 365 app detection. And the fourth one was basically databases. So MySQL, SQL, Mongo, all of those detections. Then web server detections in terms of IIS, etc., and more of modules, and then PHP and WordPress, Joomla, CMS detections, okay, and any vulnerabilities related to those. So we've added all of these into the system so that basically the external scan becomes more comprehensive. So as we compare the reports of certain external scans from other tools and basically compare it with us, we basically finding ourselves basically coming close to them. We are finding a few differences, and those differences we are trying to reconcile to see whether that is a false positive or basically it is really a vulnerability or not. And if it is really a vulnerability, then we are figuring out how to fix it up. if not, basically we are essentially kind of removing those things because those are false positives. As of now, basically in most of the cases that we see, we basically find a lot of false positives, but we also finding a few cases where we are not doing the full detections. Now, my only request is if the folks on the call, if you can basically kind of, if you are looking to replace your existing tool with this, if you can give us a set of sample reports that you ran against an IP, where you basically believe that those results were far superior, then please, if you want to remove those IPs, etc., ideally, without removing the IPs, if you can give it, it will be better because it's an external scan, because there are no credentials in it. If you can just give us the report, then we could essentially look at it and basically figure out if we are missing anything more. And that would help us in basically kind of bringing this on par with every other tool, so that we can give you the cost advantage of running one tool, plus basically making the product better so that it works better in your environment. Okay. So the next one, what's cooking right now? We are hard at work in terms of doing the work that I was talking of in terms of the patching engine. One of the things is basically we're maintaining the chocolatey repository, we're pulling data. So we are essentially creating an independent patching engine. And what we are doing with this whole patching engine pieces, we are basically kind of bringing in scoop.sh as one patching engine. But the whole idea is that we are going to essentially give you the flexibility to choose your patching engine. So we're going to start with two, which is you can either choose to use the chocolatey patching engine or the scoop patching engine. We'll also basically for, like Tim pointed out, and I think that's perfectly right, especially on Windows 10 and Windows 11 desktops, we'll be using, we'll be allowing you to use the Winget operating system. So again, as an opt-in, you can opt in to basically use patching. Second is you can choose which tool you want to essentially use for patching. So it could be basically this, it could be one of chocolatey, scoop, or you basically want to use Winget for Windows. And then again, in terms of package managers, basically, if you're using CentOS, then you could use Yum or RPM. That's a choice that we'll be providing you. So that way, what happens is that it's a choice that you make and basically kind of use it. We'll give you sensible defaults. If you want to override it and use your own package manager, that is essentially entirely up to you. So this way, what happens is that we will be kind of maintaining parity for all of the packages across these patching engines, but we will essentially not be forcing you to use our patching engine. So that way it basically becomes a little bit more of flexibility and freedom for you. Last but not the least, what we are trying to really work on in basically a very concerted fashion to be completed by the end of this month is basically integrating tightly with the RMM so that we can deploy these packages using the RMM. And that's, I think, is basically probably the best solution for offering it to everyone, because that way it goes through a trusted tool. And second is it basically also is easier for you to reconcile and basically say that these operations were done. While it is done automatically from this Cyber CNS side, it is basically done through the RMM, which basically has the agent and has the mechanisms to do the right things for you, is basically what we're looking at. Last but not the least, we will be basically introducing Linux and Mac OS patching towards the end of this month, and Windows patching probably basically in the next couple of months we're basically looking at. So this is where we are, and this is the summary of the stuff that we've been working.
All right, Shiva, good stuff. This is awesome. All right, let me go to some questions here for you. People are loving the customization, Shiva. A statement from Sean, but it's kind of a question, Shiva. Internal notes versus normal notes for ConnectWise?
Yes, we basically have support for both internal and description, internal notes and normal notes. And then you can also set it to be customer visible or not customer visible. So that's internal notes here. In some of the cases, it's called customer visible. So we've kind of created that field called customer visible. In addition to that, one of the things that I forgot to mention is that you will be able to kind of manage all of these integration, ticketing rules inside of each of the integrations too. So when you go to a ConnectWise integration, you can see all the rules that apply to the ConnectWise integration, and you can manage it from there.
Very cool. Tim, I asked, Fournette asks, is it possible to enumerate the actual vulnerability in here, or is it just counts?
You can get the actual vulnerabilities too. If you want to basically dump the list of vulnerabilities, you can dump the list of vulnerabilities. There's actually a field over there which basically points to the actual vulnerability.
Tim asks, are you catching WordPress vulnerabilities, Shiva?
Yes, WordPress in Joomla we are catching.
Okay. Should we? So Chris Lewis says, should we provide those sample reports to support or send somewhere else? I should be able to provide Nessus comparisons.
So you can just send it to my email ID because I'm coordinating this. It's shiva@netanalytics.co or Vrishali on this call. So Vrishali, either of us, you can basically send it to.
Rashali, would you mind just, as I read the questions, could you just put in chat so people can?
Yes, I'm sharing the email IDs there on the chat, so they can send it there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, what happened there? Oh, there's okay. Okay, Michael Meyer. I noticed recently that Cyber CNS did not detect Microsoft Office 365 click to run missing patches that Tenable did detect. Is this something others are seeing as well? Any thoughts on that?
I will basically get this checked because we've had multiple of these basically being reported. So I am not sure. There are two things which basically I think I also would like to get the collective wisdom of the team. So because this is something that keeps coming on and off in some of our conversations there. So for example, if there is a vulnerability in say version 10.1, right? And essentially what we do is that we maintain the version saying that what is the latest version, say the latest version is 10.8. Somebody upgrades from 10.1 to 10.3, right? And now the vulnerabilities are fixed. So what happens is that we essentially go back and in the remediation plan, we will essentially close it because the vulnerabilities no longer exist. Although you didn't move to 10.8, you moved to 10.3 instead of 10.8. But basically, from our perspective, since the vulnerabilities have been closed, that is a remediation that is considered as closed from our side. Now, we've seen certain partners basically come back to us and say, no, you should not do that. And unless I'm at 10.8, which is the latest version, you should essentially leave that remediation open. Now, I would like to understand from the team how basically they think we should handle this, because if I leave the remediation open, then it is essentially something which is wrong because it says you have vulnerabilities, which is not the case. And basically, there may be a business reason not to upgrade to 10.8. At the same time, basically, I do see the point of I would rather have the customer on the latest version than having him on a version that's basically intermediate. So I just wanted some help in terms of how do we address this.
Anyone want to come on and ask, give thoughts on that? What do you, Shiva, maybe is there some specificity that you'd be looking for in feedback?
No, it's just that, see, I'm on 10.1. I basically have updated 10.3. Vulnerabilities are gone, but I'm not in the latest version. So we are basically, our behavior right now is to basically close the remediation, close the associated ticket and say, you're good to go. Because from a vulnerability manager perspective, we are good to go. But there have been quite a few partners who've said, no, that's not the case. You should basically tell us you should close the remediation only when I'm at 10.8, right? So that's the only thing. So I agree with Justin because he says like if it's patched, it's patched. We can't. That's what we do as a system now. But that just wanted to very quickly ask about that. That's it.
Like, hey, you're not at the late. Basically, you're patched, but maybe it's like a kind of an option. Shiva, you're patched, but you're not on the latest version. Do you wish to close?
Yeah. No, but the point is that then it removes the automation. Then it's manual again. So.
Yeah, no. I'm posing the question to the group. Do you want it automatically closed, or do you want an option to prompt you to close it? What do you prefer?
Hi, this is Dennis. Typically, vulnerabilities are listed along with the version. So I would say, as long as it shows that there are no vulnerabilities, I would go ahead and leave it as listed, like that you're not up to the latest version, but there are no vulnerabilities. And maybe there's even a way to separate those into a separate section. Like these are applications that are not vulnerable, but they're also not the latest version. Maybe that's a solution.
Okay, so we can basically say that these applications have upgrades, might be a separate section which could be applied, and it's ideally you should apply these upgrades, and basically the other part is basically vulnerabilities, correct?
Dennis, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, that's my suggestion, is that maybe there's a set way of tagging them, or a separate section that says, these applications have no known vulnerabilities, but they also have updated versions available.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So we'll basically implement this.
Okay. Off topic, but can Cyber CNS give a report of MFA status on M365?
Yes, it will basically in the next 2 weeks, because we have if you remember, like almost 3 months back, we started on an engine which basically was working with Azure AD and Office 365. We didn't quite release it, but now we're basically getting ready to release it, because we've been able to kind of stabilize the existing version and everything is fine. So we are now basically creating this. So yes, in a couple of weeks, you will get a report for MFA status for Office 365.
Okay. Dennis says, are there still plans for increasing the O365 auditing and alerting capabilities?
Yes. Yes. So that's basically the part of the thing that I said. We complete Azure and Office 365, basically putting them into compliance and being able to kind of audit them and being able to kind of create alerts on them is basically like one of the critical pieces we're getting.
Okay. Tim asks, are there plans to allow email integration to work with notification rules? Last I spoke with Cyber CNS support, they said it wasn't supported.
No, it is absolutely supported even today, but essentially, as I showed with these capabilities, we will basically have with email integrations, you can define your own HTML templates and basically have dispatches. In addition to email, you also have Teams, Slack, and all the other means of communication. And one of the favorite things that at least what we built is basically the webhook, where we can actually send JSON data. So you can actually kind of define what keys you want in your JSON and basically put the values, and the webhook will get called with that particular values. I think Tim would like that.
Okay. Tim says, I saw he put these, I forget what they're called, variables, yeah, variables in the line report generator. Are you using a templating language here?
Yes, Tim, we use basically Jinja as the templating language.
Oh, you're familiar with that, Tim. You don't even have to look at the keyboard. Let's see, Michael, Michael Meyer, you make a statement. Is there a question in it about?
I was just clarifying for the question about the patching of Office 365.
Do you want to kind of ask or make sure clarification with Shiva since you're on?
Sure. Just and I think that Tim had a correct comment that there are actually two factors here: the vulnerabilities and supported version. And I think what Tenable is detecting is the fact that Office 365 was added unsupported version on the detection that I found, but Cyber CNS didn't say anything about it. And it's there because there are different channels of Office 365, depending on which channel you're on. A fully patched and supported version may actually be a lower version number than what you would see on like a current channel.
Got it, Michael. So we'll basically kind of look deeper into this and see why basically we are not calling that out. Thank you.
Okay, and there's some more comments, Shiva, about, could we just not call it a remediate, can it be a remediation type, not to mention the latest version? Two factors, Tim says. Justin, I like Dennis's idea. Jerry, do you want to talk about what you mean by the PIT information and the logs, like what you're looking for here?
Sorry. Yes, I can. So I was for SOC audits and some of the other point in time audits that we're involved in, for evidence gathering, et cetera. They use the phrase point in time to refer to the ability to figure out like how things looked at a certain time frame. So in other words, if you're being audited now, they may determine that your patches are up to date and your practices are good, but they may ask, hey, do you have any evidence that your patches were current, like in March 10th of this year, for example, or maybe be given a time frame for it. So point in time audits are gaining ground on, like with some of the CMMC2 stuff coming up as well for certifications. It's possible we'll be seeing more of that on that front too. So just looking for the ability as if your system provides the ability to make changes or do mitigation types of activity, the ability to have logs and information to know how things looked at, in the past. So right now we're doing it just by generating tons of reports and saving them, frankly. So that's our main method to do it at the moment. I was just throwing that out there that in the future, if you've got something like a chocolatey or an interface to a patching piece in your application, that we look for the ability to prove prove what things looked like a few months ago, for example.
So Jerry, actually, luckily, I think for this part of it, we kind of thought through it, but we have not exposed to the interface. So we do, what we are doing right now is that baselining everything to a first of the month, and very shortly we'll essentially be providing a settings where you can basically set the baseline. So what we actually do is that for every month, we basically generate reports on a particular day, and essentially we don't store the actual report, but whatever is the content that basically was used to generate the report, a historical version of it is basically being stored into an S3 bucket. Okay. So then we will be able to kind of provide you with the capability where you go into your report section and say that generate this report as of March 2022. And you would essentially get a report of March 2022. And second, what that allows us also to do is to basically generate what is called a differential report, saying that show me what was my state in March 2022 to what is the current state. So it will essentially generate what is called a comparative report between the two time periods where it will essentially show you like those two documents side by side and how you did against each other between March and at this particular point of time. So what we plan to do is that we plan to restrict this to a maximum of 3 comparisons because of basically logistical space and other issues. But essentially, we are going to be creating this for every single report that you have on the UI. And we've already started this work. We already have history for, I think, 3 months now. So once we basically roll out this feature, you'll be able to go back at least 3 months. And then in the future, you'll be able to go back or like however longer you want. So our goal is to keep it for 2 years and eventually basically make it available for everyone.
Terrific. Thank you.
Right. One second, sure. So David asks, is there any way to split out lightweight agent scans so that we can see the entire environment so that the entire environment isn't performing a scan at the exact same time, maybe target groups or devices with based on tags?
So David, you will not need to worry about this because there is basically the auto schedule feature that we are essentially putting in. This essentially tells you basically define between what time and what time you, instead of a specific timing, you essentially say between what time and what time you need this scan to be completed. And we will essentially schedule the scans in a way that it basically does not cause all of them to run at the same time. In beta, we've actually released this for a few of the customers and basically have seen much better results. So that essentially will take care of it. And Dennis, you're right. Along with that is this change where LWAs are sending changes automatically when detected, but there are certain changes that it can't send. So those will still be scheduled. So 80% of the changes will be as soon as it's detected and 20% will essentially be on a scheduled manner.
Right. I think we're up to speed there, Shiva.
Excellent.
Yeah. Any other things you guys might want to ask Shiva? Should we give you guys back a little bit of your time today?
This is Dennis. I wonder if we could discuss a little bit the security implications of Scoop versus Chocolatey. I know Chocolatey maintains a repository. It looks, I was just reading the Scoop documentation. It looks like Scoop actually goes out to the source to download the patches. Is that true?
That's correct.
So in that sense, it would seem that, because one of the concerns about Chocolatey always is what repository are you using, and is there a possibility that somebody can slip a malicious update into that repository? So it sounds like Scoop would be more secure in the sense that it's going directly to the source to download those updates. Is that true?
That's correct, Dennis. That's one of the reasons for why we're moving to Scoop, because one of the problems we're also finding with Chocolatey, see, we do not know at what point of time, some day when I wake up in the morning, we read news that basically all of the Chocolatey servers have been replaced with malware or something of that order. So, which is one of the reasons we basically went with Scoop, so that we can essentially download from basically the source websites and sources rather than basically from arbitrary locations or anything which is basically posted into a Chocolatey repository. And the problem is there are a lot of applications which we are not able to exactly authenticate who basically posted them and pushed them into the Chocolatey repository. And that is where we basically kind of, we were a little worried about using Chocolatey from a long-term perspective, which is why we moved to Scoop, where we are creating the configurations and we give it directly from whoever is the OEM and not from any other package source.
Sounds great. Yeah, because the number of applications that can be updated using the patch system currently is pretty limited. And so I think, application updating I'm a little bit more leery about operating system updates, but application updates, I think, are really just being able to say to clients, hey, click this link and it will update for you. I think that's a pretty powerful feature.
All right. Any plans for monitoring or reporting on shared folders and new shares in SharePoint?
Yes, it's part of the whole Office 365 plus Azure monitoring that we're putting in place. OneDrive, SharePoint, all of it.
Shiva, would there be any like, I don't know, in reporting, like a lot of companies, I know the technical folks on this team would know, but like, how like you spin up a Teams, somebody in Teams, and obviously it opens SharePoint for them as well. Would what you're doing kind of also allude in reporting, like in layman's terms, maybe to, doing a QBR or something of, oh, by the way, these are now available for your company, or do you want all these, potential repositories of documents that could be, people could be moving things, changing things. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
So you're basically saying that if basically, would we have the ability to essentially kind of say, for example, move all the reports that belong to a particular company into like OneDrive so that they can essentially kind of have that data?
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm not doing a good job explaining. So when you open up a Teams like account, it also opens up SharePoint automatically. And a lot of, again, I know that most of the folks on this call know that, but that's, obviously a potential threat. People don't realize that now all of a sudden they've opened up a SharePoint account as well, or SharePoint instance automatically because of Teams. And I was just wondering, would that be helpful? I'd love the MSP's thoughts. Maybe would it be helpful to basically be able to tell your clients, by the way, this is also open now because you guys opened up these Teams accounts for your people? Am I making sense for anybody, or am I off base here? I guess I'm off base, Shiva. No comments here. Oh, okay. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate the validation. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so yeah, basically most lay people, Shiva, and that run a business don't realize that they're like, yeah, we're all collaborating on Teams and we just hired all these people and we just added them. And well, do you know that they all now have SharePoint access, and that, that's another threat vector for the company? And so I don't know, with the reporting, now that you're doing all this reporting, could it also let that be known in a report, if that makes sense?
So basically licensing, and basically what licenses are getting opened up and what apps are people getting access to is part of the Office 365 piece that we're putting together, Andrew. So for each user, you'll be able to see what they're getting access to.
Okay. So it might say, hey, Jim Smith, you just added Jim, and he's, he has access to Teams, SharePoint, this kind of a thing.
Yeah, just like basically you have shares, you will basically get data for all of these pieces.
Okay. That's exciting to see. Good stuff.
I have a question here.
Yeah, please.
On your compliance report, I know I mentioned this before, and I don't know whether it's been updated or not, but on your compliance, when you're doing HIPAA or CIS, it gives you what's in compliance, what's not in compliance. Is there still a way, or is there a way to check off that it is in compliance? Because we use a third-party tool to make it compliant that we manage. Whether it is your AV is turned off, or you're disabling, Control Alt Delete, that we're managing those compliances ourselves in our tools under Datto or any other RMM PSA tool.
This has come up before, right, Shiv?
Yes, it has. So I think I agree. Basically, I think we'll just have to sit with my engineering team and evaluate this. I'll come back with an answer next week.
Yeah, I just want to make sure where the vulnerabilities stand on our part versus the and the compliance part. So if we're actually managing that process, I can't run a report to show them where the vulnerabilities are if we're taking care of it. Now I would have to export that out to Excel and give them a separate report for that, which is, you know, it actually skews it a lot, and where we're not doing our job to make sure we're, you know, you're in compliant when we actually are. So, thank you, Tim.
So Brian, what would basically be the ideal ask in this particular case?
It really would be under your compliance report that we can mark it that it's in compliant to others, or it's in compliant by us. So if we're managing that compliant or a third-party tool, we have an option to mark it as who is responsible for that line item that's in your compliance report.
Okay, so basically, what you basically want to do is that define that this action is basically who is basically responsible for that particular compliance action, and then I would almost think of like basically it being a template where you create it, and when the reports come out, it basically comes out with that column which says who's responsible for the same. Correct?
Correct. We can just mark it as who is responsible to manage that compliant line item.
Yes.
Or if it is in compliant, that your product is not going in as compliant, so it doesn't show up back on the report again. Have the user be able to, or the MSP be able to manage that. Making sense to you on that?
Yes. So I think we can do that, and we'll work on that and get it out shortly. But I understood what exactly you're saying.
Thank you.
And Dennis is making the same. Sounds like it's accomplished tags. Tim was suggesting tags. Sat through a webinar. So Chris says, I sat through a webinar with Varonis a while back, and it was really something for exposing permissions and file shares across local file shares and entire O365 ecosystem, but the pricing made it hard to sell into most customers. Also seemed to do a good job identifying. Yeah, well, sure, Varonis certainly plays in that sensitive file content area. Responsibility for the item. Jerry says responsibility for an item would be managed in the interface in the interfacing to the. Jerry, can you state that? I'm not sure what you're.
Two topics ago, when the gentleman was talking about being able to track who's responsible for the compliance of various items, that sounds like it's overlapping a little bit with GRC functionality or maybe even ticketing systems. Yeah. So probably something for you guys to keep in mind if you're exposing or adding the ability to track that information. It'll have to fit into your interface thinking. You know, so if you have John Smith is responsible for patches on the network, for example, I'm just making that up, then it seems like if you're interfacing to the ticketing system to generate tickets for patching or for mitigation activities, what we're talking about is being able to follow through with it through those layers. Is that right?
Sure.
I think it was more about responsibility, just keeping a simple responsibility column which basically says who's responsible for that particular line item. Because it could basically be that it is managed, like for example, if the MSP managing IT is different from the MSP who's managing security, then this is something that needs to be fixed by the MSP managing IT versus me who's managing the security piece, right? So it kind of helps them draw the line of responsibility, or some things might be some things that are owned by the customer themselves. So you have to perform this action. So that's what I think Brian was basically alluding to.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. That there's two poles here. You're right about Gary. You're right about keeping track in your tool, your ticketing tool, who's responsible for that. But in cyber CNS, it will still come up as being out of compliance when it is in compliance, because cyber CNS is not directly seeing the control alt delete. You know, if we disable your tool is showing it disabled or it's enabled, and we're managing it. We did that on purpose to do it because of a compliance issue. So we have to mark it as showing it isn't compliant. Somehow, some way, we have to show that it's in compliance. Every time we run the tool, it's going to still show it out of compliance. Your thoughts on that one, Jerry? Is I don't know how you guys are doing that now. Something that shows it's out of compliance, but it really is. Does it be formed by somebody else, or be formed by the MSP?
Yeah, that's interesting. Our model's a little different because we're running through GRC, but that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. I think sounds like Shiva and the folks will toss that one around.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, tagging notes. So a lot of comments on that there. All right. Anything else, guys? Shiva, any closing comments?
Just that we'll be releasing these pieces tomorrow. So please give us feedback, anything that you think is missing, etc. And as I said, we are a company that basically listens to your feedback. So whatever you tell us is essentially what goes back into the product. So if you're doing something wrong, please let us know. And if you're doing it right, then let us know too, because we then basically become a little confident in what we're doing. So
With the release of this show, would we want to have a partner call next Wednesday to get feedback?
yes.
Okay, cool. All right, everybody, give you 7 minutes back and look forward to seeing you here next week. Great job, Shiva and team, as always. Thank you, partners, for your input as always. Wishing you all a great week. I'm going to be at DattoCon. I don't know if any of you are going to be there, but if you are, I'd love to meet up with you. So shoot me an email if you are. Tim, I'll look forward to seeing you there. Shiva, thanks again. Everybody have a fantastic week.
Thanks, Andrew. Have a great week.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.